Welcome to episode 6 of the Record Collectors Club Conversations podcast. A special welcome along to my guest on tonight's episode, which is Mark Mcdonald. Mark has just released a vinyl records related book around rap records in the 1980s and 90s, which I've got in my hand here. The book's titled Megablast, the top 100 rap records 1987 to 1993, and it covers a genre of music that myself and others might not know much about, but Mark's book digs into the genre really deep. So looking forward to getting into it as well. So welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having us on, mate. It's an honour.
No problem at all. Right, so I've been following the book project over the last couple of years, and it's great to see it finally in print. So I'm sure it's such a relief to finally get it over the line. Is that right?
Yeah. If you speak to my wife, she's even more excited about the fact it's the 12-year project has come to an end now. But yeah, it's. I mean, to self-publish it, to write it, design it, produce it, get it printed, it's taken a long time. Yeah, 12 years. So it's lovely now to get all the feedback from people.
Good stuff. And obviously, self-publishing my own book before, like you can't beat holding that finished product, can you, in your hand, and just it's like when you buy a record, when you get it back from the shop and you just like you can't stop looking at it and like I can imagine it's the same for you.
It is. I mean, it's for something that's so small. When you look at it and the amount of years and stuff, as you probably know, that go into it, it's such a small little. I don't say pamphlet, but collection of pages. But it's a wonderful thing to tangibly hold it, and then like you say, a record. It's. I think that feeling, tactile feeling, is linked, isn't it?
That's it. Okay, so you mentioned it's been a 12-year project. So that's when you started researching, compiling the book. Is that right?
Yeah, the initial idea came in 2012. And I, probably like yourself, I'm a massive fan of the, music media and stuff. And ever since, early teenage years, I've been reading mags and looking at record reviews. And I always felt that the UK rap side of stuff from around about, everything up to about 93 had always been passed off as a bit naff, and it wasn't in the same league as other genres like jungle or breakbeat or rave. And I just thought there needed to be an intelligent critique on it to almost shine a spotlight back on it. And that was the genesis of, right, so can I pick 100 of what I think were those best tunes in that era? And that was it. Yeah, in 2012, that's how that was the seed, really.
Okay, and then so that idea obviously came from you talking about owning records, I suppose, and reading other material. What was there back in the day? Because, like I said, rap music's nothing that I really know a great deal about. What kind of magazines and like kind of publications were out around that point?
Well, I mean, in the mid 80s, there was fantastic magazines like Blues and Soul, Echoes. The Enemy would really get behind it because it was all quite independent based. A lot of the record labels were independents, so they would get a lot of coverage in magazines like that. There was other magazines like Street Sounds and even bigger national mags like The Face.
Okay,
sort of, Sky and Arena, they would do exposés on the shock of the new. And so at that time, back in the mid 80s, a lot of that stuff seemed to be the new, it was the new revolution, wasn't it? That kind of music.
Okay, yeah. So then, obviously, like I say, the topic of the book is quite niche, and you've selected, what is it, 6 or 7 years to kind of focus on. Why was it that kind of 6 or 7 years? Why wasn't anything before or after? Was that like the peak of rap music at that point, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting point you make because that time period, 1987 to 1993, is generally known as the golden era of rap. So that was when the music was driven by sampling break beats. It tended to be the tempos tended to be a lot faster, a lot faster than they are now. The DJ was prominent as much as the MC in a lot of the records. And it's lovingly referred to by enthusiasts as, like I say, the golden era.
Okay.
And I'd obviously been aware of UK rap records before 1987, and it does the artists that made records a grave disservice to say they weren't around, you know. But I think in 87 there started to be this authentic voice that started coming through on the vinyl that suddenly said, well, this is not just copying America anymore. This is, you know, England is doing its own thing, and it's got a particular style that, you know, started to come out, and that for me is very neatly 87 to 93. I think the best exponents of that on vinyl were done then, you know, for me anyway.
Okay, so then obviously you just mentioned vinyl. Were you picking up all this music on vinyl at that point in your life?
Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, you were listening to a lot of radio shows, late night radio shows, and then we would be getting on the trains to go into London to try and track down what we'd heard. So the cassette culture was very prevalent as well. That me and my friends were swapping lots of cassettes. Oh, did you hear that new Slick Rick track or that new Public Enemy joint? And then you would go off. You'd have to go off on a pilgrimage to find it. And if you were lucky, you might get one of the 10 records that had been dropped off somewhere, like at Groove Records or you know, Reckless Records on the Saturday morning. And it was, you know, so the records I'm talking about, they all had a lot of time spent tracking them down, you know, back in the day.
Yeah. And then obviously, so the late 80s, early 90s rap scene, what was it like to be part of that kind of scene? I'm assuming that, not to dig in how old you are, but were you old enough to go out to the clubs and do all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Ian, because I came from the graffiti writer aspect. That was my number one calling in hip hop.
Okay.
So, but the artwork was fueled by the music. Yeah. So, you know, whenever we were jumping into abandoned factories and spraying, we would always have record bags on us that we'd been into town and picked up a record or swapped it with someone. And then like you say, the going to clubs was essential as well, because you needed that kind of tribal competitiveness, you know, that sometimes it spilled over into a bit of aggro and stuff with other groups and stuff. But, you know, we sort of traveled with quite a lot of us, and it was, you know, it was essential, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, you say you're from London. Obviously, I can tell that from your accent. That's the area that you were in and around all the time. Because I mean, again, as I say, the rap scene or anything like that. I mean, I wasn't born till 1986, so I don't know what it was.
It's a good year. Like. I salute you.
I don't know what it was kind of like in the north where I'm from. You know, was it kind of like countrywide, the kind of scene?
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to think it was all London centric, but it wasn't. You know, Bristol were really far ahead on it in the mid 80s. So were Manchester. They were, you know, they had some of the best like b-boy breaking crews that could easily hold their own with the London lot. And same with their MCs and DJs. You know, they were really up and running with what was happening down south, and in some cases I think they were setting the standards, definitely, you know. And it's a point I'm very keen to make.
Okay, and then the name Megablast, then where does that come from?
Well, it was a record that I got on a giveaway with NME magazine, I think, and it was one of those old flexi discs.
Yeah.
And it was part of a 4-track record and it had this track on it called Megablast, featuring an MC called Merlin, and it was done by Tim Simonon from Bomb the Bass.
Right. Okay.
And I heard it, and within the space of about a month, then I heard another Megablast by Public Enemy, where they put it on their first album.
Okay.
And I was looking for a word that kind of encapsulated that no holds barred, you know, DIY ethic of making music and putting it on you know, recorded audio formats. And Megablast, it just does it, doesn't it? You see it. And I think when I did the graphics for the book, it had to be the same as well. No compromise. You know, 100% you understand what's on the front of this book, as you did with the music back then.
Yeah. You just mentioned then the graphics of the book and everything like that. Is that your background? Were you a graphic designer? Is that what you do?
Yeah. I mean, I went to art school and did all that, and the degrees in graphic design, and I've always been a massive fan of typography, and what I wanted to do with the book was to avoid all the usual hip hop cliches of badly dripping spray paint, you know, New York subway styles,
Yeah.
which of course I still love, but I wanted, like, the graphics on a lot of these records back in the 80s. I wanted they gave the music a lot more dignity because they were very, very well designed record sleeves.
Mhm.
Oh, excuse me.
So then, in the introduction to the book, you say that rap music's intrinsically linked to vinyl records. Like, why is that, do you think?
Well, I think more than any other music genre, the record is not passive in hip hop. The record was needed to create new rhythms, whether it was, be it from sampling it or rhythmically scratching it.
Mhm.
It turned, no other music genre was actually involved with moving the vinyl back and forward, or on the turntable platter. So I think hip hop and rap music, it took the vinyl medium, and it took it to its heart to create something new. If you look at a lot of the scratching, there were 1970s funk records being scratched up and
Yeah.
sampled off. So that's why I think it's intrinsically linked.
Okay, and then we just mentioned scratching. Then, have you ever been involved in that in your sort of past in your life?
Like I mentioned to you before, Ian, we in our group we had, as well as the graffiti guys, we had a lot of DJs and MCs, and one of them was an amazing DJ, and he went on to form the Prodigy,
All right.
and got fed up with when we just kept getting into trouble at these hip hop jams with violence in London. And he went off into rave music. So I was always sort of him sitting around in his bedroom while he was bringing back these records. And Liam was a phenomenal scratch
Yeah.
DJ before he even got involved in the rave stuff. So um, we were all very knowledgeable about music, even though me specifically, I was doing the art side of it with the graph. Um,
Okay, so then obviously we've talked about vinyl records loads so far, and obviously vinyl records is the big catalyst for my project and where it went from and how it's come to the podcast and things. Vinyl record collection, do you have one yourself?
yes, yeah, I do. I mean, it's not, but looking at your lovely wall behind you, it's nothing like that. I mean, I've sort of thinned it out over the years,
Yeah.
but I'm always, if I can spend a lunchtime in a record shop at work, or
Mhm.
if I can get something on mail order on Discogs, I'm still tracking, because I love, probably like you, I love the buzz of it.
So in terms of your collection, what kind of is it mainly just rap and hip hop? Is that the kind of bulk of it, or do you cross
No,
over?
I've got stuff I've inherited off my dad, from like early Johnny Cash, early Cliff Richard. I'm a massive Erasure, Depeche, Kraftwerk
Okay.
collector. Other bands like Autekra, Left Field, Underworld. This book is, it's deep, but it's not the be all and end all of, and I think it would be horrible if I only was just into hip hop or that music. Um, and the things with Spotify now is there's so much new stuff coming out as well that's,
Yeah.
being made by teenagers, and it's equally brilliant.
Mhm.
And
Okay, then yeah, that links us nicely to the next question then about the modern day kind of rap and hip hop kind of sounds. Is that something you have an interest in? As you just said, obviously you do listen to things on Spotify.
I do, but I think, Ian, what happened for me was that when the lifestyle hip hop rap music started coming in the sort of mid 90s, and the tempo started slowing, the
Okay.
DJs was sidelined. For me, it lost all the spark, and I was more interested, if I'm honest, in things like the Human League and Fad Gadget than I was
Mhm.
with Dr. Dre, and a lot of, and I almost listen to the stuff now, and to me, it doesn't even seem to be hip hop. It's like a fusion of R&B and other stuff. And I think it's important that you let it go where it needs to go. I mean, I've got my particular, era that I love,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't. I just think probably back then we weren't aware that it was changing all the time anyway.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't listen to new stuff at all, if I'm honest. No.
So just going back then to the sort of the era, the years that we've talked about and that you've looked at in the book. UK versus USA then in terms of the rap and the hip hop scene. How did that kind of differ in that around that period?
Well, I think the UK started to develop a lot more authentic, gritty sound. So for example, if you take an American record like Public Enemy's Rebel Without a Pause, the DNA is in there of a lot of UK stuff with the sirens, the caustics, scratching. But what England did really well that America couldn't do was the dancehall side of stuff. So when the UK ragga hip hop side started to really get going with acts like the Demon Boys, London Posse, and people like that, the Americans couldn't do it as good, because I think because of the way the English, like with the Windrush generation came to England and brought the whole ska reggae thing over and dancehall.
Yeah.
It was very easy for a lot of the English guys who probably had brothers and sisters that were older that were into the dance sound, and they absorbed it and they repackaged it. And it was, it was amazing. And I think America had a hard time hanging on the coattails of sort of dance hip hop.
And then so just going back to the book, how difficult was it to pick a number one record?
Well, if you put, as you read the book here, and you'll see that everything's linked to a memory. And the number one record, which by Hijack,
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Liam from Prodigy, but he just come back from London and he brought these records, and I sat on his bed, and he was practicing for a DJ mix competition called the DMC Championships.
Okay.
Where you would do regional heats, and then if you won your heat, you get to go to the Royal Albert Hall and battle for the UK title. And he brought these records, and one of the records was this record. I'd never heard anything like it, Ian. It was just an assault from beginning to end, and it knocked me over, and I was like, what the hell's this? It was like, oh, it's this group Hijack. It's like, I was like, oh my God, and on the strength of that record, an American rapper, Ice-T, heard it, and he signed them to an American label because they were so, yeah. And it was that record that's number one is almost like the perfect template where a lot of other groups did it, but they didn't do it quite as well, and the whole, you may have heard the term Britcore that was adopted by European enthusiasts of the British rap stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that it had sirens, it had fast samples, it had scratches, the break beats were properly rolling. And I think it's an example of where it was done better than the Americans,
Mm-hmm.
So the memory of it, I knew it had to be number one in answer to your question.
Okay. So then what year was that? What year was that record from then?
That came out I think I heard it in October 88.
Okay.
So it's probably knocking about a few months before in the London record shops, on white labels.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a relatively early record. You think the book's only picking it up from 87. But what it did do is it set the scene for a whole plethora of other artists to see what Hijack were doing, and they started doing their take on it.
Okay.
And
I was going to say, how easy are these records still to find in shops, in secondhand record shops?
Well, you'd be surprised. A lot of them are still relatively cheap. They don't go for huge sums of money. But who knows? After this book, you might find that. But a lot of them, a lot of the records could be picked up for under a tenner. Okay. Even now on Discogs. Some of them, the more white label based ones, that the prices go into the hundreds now. But I've always maintained, just because something's rare and it's a white label, it doesn't mean it's still as good as something that was on a major label like Profile or Musical Life or something like that.
Okay. I assume that's because the promos were limited in number, and that's why the demand was there to try and
Yeah,
get them.
yeah, and I don't know if it's the same in kind of your sort of genres, but the white label seems to be a badge of honor.
Hmm.
If you've got a white label of something like, the
Yeah.
White Stripes or something like that,
Yeah.
then you've done more than the person that's gone to sort of the record shop and bought the label version. So even, there was always a kudos as if you were in a club and a DJ put the record on, you saw it was the white label. There was no evidence of what he was about to play, which is
Ah,
quite
got you.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you didn't want to be revealing where your breaks or where your sources were coming from.
Yeah, yeah, I get you. I get you. Okay. Obviously the book for is heavily obviously around the 12-inch format. Um, was that the key format back in the day for hip hop and
It,
rap?
it, it yeah, it tended to be because what you would get is you'd get the standard A side release that you'd probably heard on the radio, but then
Mhm.
you got really creative things like you'd get an a cappella, which was gold dust for DJs because they would then take that a cappella and I mean, and then they would then morph that, sample that with no drums behind it. It's the perfect. So if you look at all these early rave records, especially like you look at the Prodigy's first album,
Mhm.
it's absolutely littered with these a cappellas that Liam's had nicked these 12-inch records, and you could license them for as cheap as chips. So it's hilarious. That I think that's why the 12 inches. You'd get an instrumental on the B side as well,
Mhm.
and then you might get another track that they'd just done in the studio, but they didn't really want to put out as an A side, which would still be brilliant. A bit like the Oasis thing, isn't it? It's the B side's better than the A side.
Yeah, generally that was the case with Noel, yeah. And then obviously we talked again about your graphic design background and your love for art and things like that. Vinyl, a lot of the collectors heavily lean on the artwork and the sleeve art. In terms of like sort of rap and hip hop, obviously, because I do know some of the big ones. The Prodigy you just mentioned there, that their first record was that Fat of the Land, the first Prodigy record.
No, it was called Prodigy Experience.
That was it.
And it
Yeah, sorry.
plain white cover, wasn't it? With black type on it, and um, but it was. I mean, it for me. If you're searching through the racks, you're probably like you're probably looking for something. First of all, if you've got no idea what you're coming across,
Hmm.
that visual introduction is very important, isn't it? There were some amazing bits of graphic design that were done for. There was no budget to do these things a lot of the time. They were just done with someone had a mate that was a designer or could draw quite well, um, and you just get them to do it. And then by as the years went on, they become design classics, for all the right reasons, because they were just done in a night time around someone's flat, a bit of paste up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, you're just talking about when you're digging through the records in shops and things like that. I don't know if you're the same, but when I'm looking for a record, somehow in my memory now, because I've been around records for 15 years or whatever, I know a record sleeve that I'm looking for, and that's the first kind of like, there it is kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you're the same.
Yeah, do you find it's a bit like an intuition? You
Yeah.
can't put your finger on why you're going to take that to the counter without knowing anything about it, but it, I think, Ian, it pays off, doesn't it? You
Does.
bring home these things and you put them, and you were like, it was almost meant to be.
Hmm.
That I had to that this record found its way back into my sort of collection.
Yeah, yeah. No, that exactly. I think that's something that all vinyl collectors that I've spoke to in the past for books and for the podcasters have kind of like always clicked on that kind of visual link to the records as well as just the sound as well. So, um,
Yeah, it's. I mean, I was a massive fan of independent labels, and you'd have these beautiful, like if you look at the early Mo Wax stuff, James Lavelle sort of
all right,
with
yeah.
DJ Shadow, you get these amazing ornate triple die cut sleeves that would pull out and then reveal another bit of artwork, and they were absolute. You really felt you were getting something for your money. And to put that in a record bag was a lovely feeling, on a
Absolutely.
Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay, so then finally going back to the book again, obviously, because that's the main topic of the conversation tonight. It seems to have been a big success. And obviously, following you on social media, it seems like everybody's been enjoying the book as it's been landing on their doorsteps. What do you have anything that's next on the horizon for the Mega Blast project, or are you taking a break from a little bit, or
I think, yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to get the last batch of orders out for the end of October for the second print run.
yeah,
Uh, what I might look at in 2025 is maybe putting out an actual record because I
wow.
got so much access to the guys and girls that made this music back then.
Hmm.
I was very lucky enough to get given CDs or USB sticks with unreleased stuff on.
Wow.
Um, and it would be a lovely thing to maybe put out like a 4-track EP of, using the branding with sort of Megablast on the really stark yellow. Um, and I might, I don't think, to be honest with you, and I don't think I've got another book in me. I think I'll let someone else do the next bit. But I think, like you're saying about the feedback, it's been a lovely feeling to kind of know that it's myself, and I think it's important to mention a guy called Ed Roberts who really put a nuclear rocket up the project, because he came on board and as a researcher, a writer, and a sub editor, and he made a tremendous difference. And I think he's got plans to do one on electro records, which his knowledge is amazing. I think I might, just gracefully bow out and let him write that one, and maybe take a design interest in it. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good shout. Just got obviously you just mentioned then touching on contacting some of these artists and things like that. How approachable were most of them? Were they happy to kind of listen and help out?
I think, yeah, because there were a lot of people didn't want to get involved. I think, and you reach out with good intentions, and for whatever reason you don't hear back. And I you know, it's a contentious topic of a white guy writing about black music, which predominantly is what we're dealing with here.
Hmm.
Um, but then I think when I explained to a lot of people, the whole ethos of the project was to donate, after our production costs are deducted, to donate some money to Alzheimer's. Um, People just opened up and realised it wasn't it's not a profit making enterprise.
Yeah,
There's barely any money left over. Um, and I think people just saw it as a real labour of love. Like I've got the day job. I'm bringing up the family and stuff, and I'm still doing it. I'm not doing it for any ego thing. In fact, I'd rather all the people in the book be the ones that
yeah,
get the spotlight on them and get interviewed. And so luckily the people you see in the book were really enthusiastic. And it was amazing to hear them say, "Oh, my dad had Alzheimer's," or my uncle had it, and this is brilliant.
yeah.
Where do you want to meet?
Yeah, no, that's a really nice touch, Mark, and I think that's a really good place to end the conversation tonight on that nice note. Like I say, I received my copy from Mark on Friday, so I'm really looking forward to digging into this and getting my rap knowledge up to some sort of scratch. That won't be on
Well,
par with Mark's, but
I think it's lovely. What I really chuffed with is like when people like you find the book
Mhm.
and it introduces you to it,
Yeah.
and who knows where it will take you looking at some of those records.
Exactly, that's it. I mean, like I say, I have a very limited rap knowledge, but that was the same with the books that I put out. I had people reach out to me and say I interviewed, where various collectors around the world, and somebody might reach out to me and say, "Oh, I'm glad you interviewed that person because they told me about this record, and now I've got all the records that this artist put out, and I'm loving them." And that was the kind of the way I wanted to
was,
do
was was
it.
that your book then? Was it about record collectors and stuff?
Yeah, so my book, the first one was put out was put together during the pandemic, the 2020
Yeah,
pandemic, and it just gave me something to focus on, and it was interviewing collectors that I followed on Instagram mainly, and just reached out to them. They were happy. Most of the people were happy to kind of do the same thing because they were all locked in the house, like we all were. Everybody in
yeah.
the world was in the same situation. And it was just a nice thing to converse with people around the world. I was talking to people in New York one night, and then I was talking to people in Australia the next morning, and it was great. And that was it. And then the book was put out in 2021. Went pretty crazy, sold loads of copies. And then again, somebody just reached out to me and said, "Are you thinking about doing another one?" And by that point, I was back to work and I was doing my usual day-to-day life, going to the pub or going to the football or whatever. And I thought, oh, should I do another one? And I did, and I'm glad I did. And then it's morphed into this podcast, and it's just growing arms and legs.
Well, let me know where I can pick the copies up. I'll definitely buy a couple of you.
Well, they're going to be back in stock in the new year, yeah. Because, like I say, I'm focusing on the podcast a bit at the moment, and my printers are really busy at the moment with other bits and bobs.
Yeah,
so yeah, I will do. But thank you for that. So
yeah, please do. I'd love to support.
yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Mark, tonight. It's been great to chat to you. And like I say, if everybody gets to follow Megablast on Instagram and social media channels, you'll find out more about the book and things like that. So.
Yeah, it's thank you for having me on. I mean, like I said before, the whole thing's been a lovely project, but the bit you're getting now is really the end of it. Now it's second print run's going to happen in about a couple of weeks. And it's those people that like yourself that have got the book that I think I hope it brings you a lot of joy. Just here and there dipping into it.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Well, thank you for coming on and have a nice evening.